Here she comes. Now it seemed good to Darius to appoint. Glad you could drop in, girls.
I'm trying to find banners.
Is the bus late?
Obviously.
We're just starting. Now remember, the Medes and the Persians took over. So Balthazar and Belteshazzar and Nebuchadnezzar and all those guys, they're out. And the Persians are in. Darius is the new king. Now it seemed good to Darius to appoint 120 satraps over the kingdom. These are like little regional governors, is what a satrap was, or a satrap as we say. That they should be in charge of the entire kingdom. And over them 3 commissioners, of whom Daniel was one, that these satraps might be accountable to them. Most of this was done for taxing purposes. So that, you're a satrap, all you guys are satraps, and I'd say, well, Sandy, how many people have you got in your district? And you'd say, well, we've got 350. Okay, well, then your taxes is this much. And same thing. So it was mostly done for taxing. And these satraps might be accountable to them, and that the king might not suffer any loss. The loss there is, of course, financial loss. He didn't want to miss anything. Then this Daniel began to distinguish himself amongst the commissioners and the satraps because he possessed an extraordinary spirit, and the king had planned then to put him over the entire kingdom. Then the commission and the satraps began trying to find a ground of accusation against Daniel, of course, in regard to government affairs, but they could find no ground for accusation or evidence of corruption, inasmuch as he was faithful and no negligence or corruption was to be found in him. Now these men said, we shall not find any ground of accusation against Daniel unless we find it against him in regard to the law of his God. So then these commissioners and satraps came by agreement to the king and spoke to him as follows: King Darius, live forever. And all the commissioners of the kingdom, the prefects and the satraps and the high officials and the governors had consulted together that the king should establish a statute and enforce an injunction that anyone who makes a petition to any god or man besides you, O king, for 30 days shall be cast into the lion's den. Now, O king, establish this injunction and sign the document so that it may not be changed according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which may never be revoked. Therefore King Darius signed the document, that is, the injunction. Now when Daniel knew that this document was signed, he entered his own house. Now, in his roof chamber, he had windows open towards Jerusalem. And he would continue kneeling on his knees 3 times a day, praying and giving thanks before God, as he had been doing previously. And these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and supplication before his God. Then they appointed and spoke before the king about the king's injunction. Did you not sign an injunction that any man who makes a petition to any god or man besides you, O king, for 30 days is to be cast into the lion's den? And the king answered and said, that statement is true according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked. Then they answered and spoke before the king, O Daniel is one of the exiles from Judah, and he pays no attention to you, O king, or to the injunction which you signed. But he keeps making his petitions 3 times a day. Then as soon as the king heard this statement, he was deeply distressed, and he set in his mind on delivering David until sunset, and kept exerting himself to rescue him. Then these men came by agreement to the king and said to the king, recognize, O king, that it is the law of the Medes and the Persians that no injunction or statute which the king establishes may ever be changed. So then the king gave orders, and Daniel was brought in and cast into the lion's den. The king spoke and said to Daniel, your God, whom you constantly serve, will himself deliver you. And a stone was brought and laid over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring, and with the signet rings of his nobles, so that nothing might be changed in regard to Daniel. Then the king went off to his palace and spent the night fasting, and no entertainment was brought before him, but his sleep fled from him. Then the king arose at the dawn, the break of day, and went in haste to the lion's den. And when he had come near to the den, to Daniel, he cried out with a troubled voice. And the king spoke and said to Daniel, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you constantly serve, been able to deliver you from the lions? And Daniel spoke to the king, O king, live forever. My God has sent his angel and shut the mouths of the lions, and they have not harmed me, inasmuch as I was found innocent before God, and also towards you, O king. I have committed no crime. And the king was very pleased and gave orders for Daniel to be taken up and out of the den. So Daniel was taken up and out of the den, and no injury whatsoever was found upon him, because he had trusted completely in his God. And the king gave orders, and they brought the men who had maliciously accused Daniel, and they cast them and their children and their wives into the lion's den. And they had not reached the bottom of the den before the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. Then Darius and the king wrote to all the peoples, nations, and men of every language who was living throughout the land, May peace abound with you. I make now a decree that in all my dominion of my kingdom men are to fear and tremble before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, enduring forever, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed, and his dominion will be forever. He delivers and rescues and performs signs and wonders both in heaven and on earth, and who has also delivered Daniel from the very power of the lions. So this Daniel enjoyed a success in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. It was under Cyrus that we would finally convince the Medes and the Persians to start letting the Jews go home. Cyrus would start it, Darius would help out, and you'll see the rest of that history in a little bit. But anyway, what do you think about this? Ow.
Like I was saying, that there are so many things in here to me that happened to Jesus. Like he was accused also by religious leaders.
Right. Well, you know, there's an old expression, and people have been voicing this for 1,000,000 years, I'm sure, since the days of Jesus. Certainly in seminary, and the wise old professors would look at his men, young, eager-minded, bright-eyed seminarians, and say, I'm going to tell you one truth, and I want you to believe this truth now, and if you don't believe it now, you will believe it as you enter the ministry. That truth is, and I'm not talking about the godless heathens out there in the world. I'm talking about the people that fill the pews of every church in the United States and America. And this truth is, for every one of you who will praise you for being a good preacher, for every one of you who try to fight the good fight, stay on task, and disseminate the Word of God, for everyone who praises you for that, there'll be 10 plotting against you or despising you for that. And he says, if you don't believe that, come and talk to me in 10 years. Well, you know, I couldn't really believe that myself. But after, 6 or 8 years in my former denomination, I believed it very much. In fact, many churches have people that we pastors have come to call, they're pastor hunters. And they look for ways to just, hurt a pastor. And Benny knows this for a fact. When we started this little church, now we're in our 41st year, there was a little church called Audubon Park, not too far away. And how many pastors have they had in these same 41 years?
I have no idea. I lost it.
I think they're up to 15 now or something like that. Maybe the girl that's down there now is 16 or something. But just one after another. And a couple of them were really good men, fabulous men, doing a great job. In fact, our churches used to share a lot of stuff. We'd do events together and things like that. You remember all them things? And Christmas Eves and stuff like that?
The best minister they ever had.
Yeah, and he's dead, by the way. Did you know that? He died.
I I heard that.
up in Canada. He went to Canada and he died. Anyway, huh?
Stroke.
Yeah, he died of a stroke and a heart attack together, and God killed him. Anyway, but there were people down there that just made his life miserable, no matter what good he did. And I'm not just talking about one, I'm talking about a whole slew of them. And they worked and worked and worked and worked and worked. Finally, we distanced ourselves and said, you know, I don't want this kind of infection getting up here into my church. And whereas you have had one minister for now 40 years, they have had 15 or 16. I've lost count too. I'd have to go back and look at the record. Well, you know, why is that? Why is that? Because, again, I'm going to say it out loud, for every person that praises you for being a Christian in this world, there'll be 10 that say, what a waste of time. What a waste of energy. Why should I go to church? I don't believe there's any God. Look online. You ever go on the social media? And somebody posts a little religious something? And look at the comments after it. The comments are horrific. One or two will say, wow, that's really wonderful and sweet. I believe that. But the majority of them will say, there ain't no God, there ain't no sin, there ain't no hell. Stop trying to control our lives. Stop trying to do this, do that. Blah, blah, blah. On they go with all their reasoning and rationale, trying to somehow sanctify their lives devoid of any God or belief therein. And, you know, and that's today. I'm talking 2024. I'm not talking 1,700 years ago or 1,200 years ago or whatever 100 years ago. I'm talking right now, 2024, and I'm not talking some backland barbaric nation. I'm talking about the most abundant nation on the planet, the United States. You've been given every privilege, every possibility, every opportunity. Wow. You know, what is it you haven't got that you need? And still they're saying there's no God, there's no heaven, there's no hell. Stop wasting my time. You guys are a bunch of weak-minded boneheads that need to believe in this religious nonsense. Wow. You know, when you stand before this God you don't acknowledge or believe in, He's going to show you what you wrote. I would love to hear you explain it. But instead of waiting for the end of time, I have to write little notes back. And I say, why don't you explain that to me now? How you've become so bitter, so devoid, and led your life in such an empty and meaningless fashion. And then they get real mad then. But then again, they don't know who I am. So that's the beauty of the internet. You can talk to people plainly. For every man that succeeds or truly praises God, loves God, gives his life to God, commits his life to God, commits his family to God, his children, his whatever, there'll be 10 out there saying, we got to get this guy out of here. We've got to get rid of this guy. And that's human nature, folks. That's true from the beginning of our existence, and I imagine it's going to stay true to the end of our existence. And it's no different. We see it a little more clearly in politics. Politics is the breeding ground of this kind of survival instinct. You know, you get ugly, you get nasty, or you get fired. That kind of stuff. And one of the reasons I came back to Florida, I was in Chicago writing advertising after college, and I realized my lifelong dream about drawing cartoons and being an animator and living the good life and wonderful. I found out the advertising agency and the advertising business is a very dirty business. And you can work and create and draw and write and come up with beautiful, beautiful pieces of work which are easily stolen and presented to the client, accepted, millions of dollars change hands, all kinds of perks and bonuses given to somebody that had nothing to do with it. And you lose 2 or 3 pieces like that, and you finally realize what kind of business you're in. And we used to have a little phrase, but it's inappropriate for church-related audiences. A little phrase for those kind of people, but nevertheless, there were more of them than there were of me. So one day I threw down my little marker pens and said, I'm going back to Florida. We don't treat people this way in Florida. We don't steal, and we don't lie, and we don't take everything that's not ours. And I left, and I came back to Florida, and then somewhere in there a blonde got involved, and then weddings and all that kind of nonsense, and God showed up. Wow. My life and my 4 years of college education was gone forever. So I started on a 10-year education to understand this book. And you know what I understand about this book, particularly the Old Testament? The Old Testament, in my business we use technical language. The OT is like a painting, and it's a very horrible painting. Have any of you ever read a book called The Portrait of Dorian Gray? 1,000 years ago. A classic book. Classic book. It is a golden boy. It's a picture of a golden boy. No man was ever created more beautiful than he was. When, as you read the book, you found out he's not really such a golden boy after all, is he? And every time he commits a crime and gets away with it because he's rich and gorgeous and everybody loves him, he can do no wrong. Those are the guys that usually do all the wrong. And every time he gets away with it, the painting gets a little uglier and a little uglier and a little uglier. And then over the many years he's committed, adulteries and crimes and even murder. He's killed people and all this stuff. And he didn't know it, but there on his wall in his famous parlor where he was most proud, his portrait kept getting a little stranger and a little stranger and a little uglier to where it got to be kind of hideous. And he said, well, I can't have this hanging on the wall. So you remember he threw it in the attic. And then he went on with his crime for years and years and years. And then at the very end of his life, he's older now and he's got big giant golden rings on and stuff like that. And he went up in the attic to look at the picture, which was his fatal mistake. When he saw the horror and the monster and the ugliness, the sheer rot and sin of his life, in an emotional moment, he took out a dagger and cut the picture all up because it was so horrible. And when he did that, of course, he fell down on the floor dead. And all the ugliness returned to him, and he was the horrid dead monster on the floor, and the portrait was back to this beautiful young man again. So there, I just ruined the end for you. But there's a high-speed chase and bombs and all this other stuff too, and Rambo gets in there with a machine gun. But anyway, that's how they all end. Anyway, here this true monster has been seen for what he is. In fact, they couldn't even identify him, the police, when they came, except for the rings on his finger. That's how they identified him. This must have been Dorian Gray. Well, it was. So that's what makes the Old Testament a little tough to take, is because it is a portrait of whom? Man. It is a portrait of human nature. And in man, I include you ladies as well. It is a portrait of humankind and who we are really. Not who we are in our minds, because, we wish people loved us like our dogs love us. The fact that is, people don't love us like our dogs love us because they're smarter and they can see through this. But in the New Testament, then, what do you see? Well, you see a portrait of good and gracious and love and kindness and mercy and forgiveness. It is beautiful. Plan ahead, Chanter. It's a beautiful portrait. Why? Well, because the New Testament is a portrait of who? God. Now, the main character exposing this new revelation of God, of course, is Jesus. And Jesus is often portrayed as I like a cliche I use, is the golden-haired, fair-haired golden boy with the tissue at the ready. Always, if you're crying, you're suffering, you're hungry, you're leprous, That tissue can do anything. You see what I'm saying? And every event he does, people just go, God, what a guy. Well, that's because the New Testament paints a portrait of the Lord. And hopefully, our need of him. Whereas the Old Testament paints a picture of man, and likewise God, and our need of him. So you get the dark side, you get the light side, you get the God, and you get the man, and you get the need for both of us getting together. But the question remains, will we ever function and fashion that? Will God ever become important to us? John would call this light and dark. God was, of course, light, and dark. Man was dark. Well, why was man dark? Well, it's obviously because if you look at the portrait of man, it's not a good portrait. So John pictured his whole gospel as dark and light. The light came and shone into the world. And at first, man didn't understand it. Why? Well, because it was new, it was different, it was weird. I'd never seen it before. When you live in a world of darkness, light is a strange and new kind of concept. And the light shone in the darkness, and it dwelt with them. And then after a while, what did man prefer? The darkness. Even though the light was still shining, man preferred the darkness. So the government, the priests, not the government was there, that was Rome, we know that. But it was the Sanhedrin, it was the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the political priests of the day, not representing the Lord they profess, but representing themselves and their own net interests. They're the ones that began to plot. By the way, plotting is darkness. How to destroy Jesus. Thinking if we can get rid of him, we've got this God hoodwinked and fooled. So if we can get rid of this Jesus character, who seems to be stirring up a lot of old stuff that we don't want to remember anymore, we can get rid of this Jesus stuff, we can go back to BAU, business as usual. Which means what? Darkness. Jesus became a problem. Then he became a headache. Then he became pains in other parts of the body. And every time he acted in goodness and kindness and justice and mercy and forgiveness and love, it made them look what? More and more like they really were. Every time Jesus acted, it made man, it forced man, supposedly the good men, to see themselves as Dorian Gray. And that was a truth they could not live with anymore. So what was the result? Well, what do you think? Get rid of them. Now, is that a New Testament issue? Or did a good little shiny bright Daniel experience the same thing? You guys get together, we got to get rid of Chanter because he's really shining light. Now I realize that's not true, but just play with me in the example here. He's shining light, he's good, he's mercy. You can't find anything against me because there's nothing against me to find. I believe in the God, I'm going to stay true to that God no matter what. You guys get together and plot. We got to get rid of this guy because he's making us look like who we really are. Well, folks, that is why we have this book called the Bible. Because there's two entities that matter in our existence. There's us, of course. And then there's this God who would invade our existence. This God who claims he made us and our existence. And he watches over us. And he's here all the time. And he's everywhere we are. And he knows all our thoughts. Even before we know them. And he says, you guys are out of hand. There's another way of doing this that's a lot holier, a lot nicer, and a lot more beautiful, if you're interested. Nowhere in the Bible does God force himself upon anybody, really. He gives you every opportunity to repent, to turn around, to come unto me. No sin I can't forgive. Anyone comes, I won't cast them out. But the bottom line is, you got to come unto me. I've come to you. I've made myself known in your existence. Now the question, the decision lies in your hands, in your court, in your heart, in your mind, whatever you want to call it. But it is solely, completely, and 100% yours. Daniel goes home upon this decree, and they made sure it was an unchangeable decree, and said, you know what? I love my God, so 3 times a day I pray to him. What is Daniel going to do when he goes home after work? He's going to pray to his Lord. He's committed to his God so that you will know. The problem is we got another new king. Darius. King of the Medes and the Persians. He wasn't Babylonian. He wasn't Chaldean. Now I'm sure he heard of Nebuchadnezzar. I'm sure he heard of Nabopolassar. I'm sure he's heard everything that Daniel has done to and with those men. Each one, God's introducing himself, saying, make a decision. Each one made poor decisions. Right? One had to go be a cow for a while. One got a handwriting on the wall. That, he's going to have to go change his shorts after that. Telling, basically you get a handwriting on the wall. Hey, note from God coming in. What's it say? You're done. That isn't what I wanted to hear. Same thing with, what's his face? Habakkuk, who's up on a tower screaming at God. Oh God, give me a message. Show me that you're doing something against this evil. And what did he say to Habakkuk? Go look out over the wall. Tell me what you see. Tens of millions of soldiers ready to kill and destroy everything that is Israel. And Habakkuk says, that's not the message I wanted to hear. Well, I'm sure old Bolton or Nabopolassar didn't want to hear that either. But, that's what it was. You're done. That very night he was destroyed. And now you got Darius and Cyrus and all these guys moving in, the Medes and the Persians. So, what do we start over again? If you don't study your history, what are you going to do? You are damned to repeat it. That's the phrase. And, you had the statue thing and the fire pot and all this other stuff, and then you had the other thing, and now you got the lion's den. Who keeps a lion's den? Think about that. I bought this new car with my bonus. What'd you do with yours? Well, I bought a lion's den.
The first zoo.
Huh?
The first zoo.
Yeah. I bought a lion's den. Why would you buy a lion's den? I don't know, but I did. If you mess with me, I'm throwing you in it. This Daniel is making us look like we really are. There ain't no such thing as God. There ain't no such thing as heaven. There ain't no such thing as... How can a person say that? Now, pay attention. An intelligent person. And I'm assuming everybody's intelligent enough to dress themselves and feed themselves. That's all you need, just a little bit of intelligence. But how can you assume that given all the stuff that exists in your world and how it continues to function in your world on a regular basis and you aren't doing it? How can you stand here and say there is no God, there is no greater power, there is no big being, there is no heaven, there is no hell? Where did earth come from? Oh, it was a big bang, a rock hit another rock, and where'd the rocks come from? You see what I'm saying? That logic just it's illogic is what it is. It makes no sense for someone to say, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in heaven, I don't believe in hell, I don't believe in lie, I don't believe in nothing. Well, obviously you do. You believe in a lot of stuff. You're proclaiming you don't, but who proclaims in something that doesn't exist? Maybe I want to tell you about this car I've never had. I think I've seen it. But I've never had one. I never will have one because I hate cars, and there's no such thing as cars, by the way. What are all them things out front of the church? I don't know, but they're not cars. Now, you look at me and say, Chanter, what's wrong with your head today? Hopefully you'd bang on it and shake it a little bit, see if you heard stuff rolling around in there. Daniel is one of those biblical litmus papers. Remember those from 5th grade science? It could tell you the existence of different chemicals in the stuff you're working on. If you take a litmus paper and stick it in there, if it turns green, it means there's this present. If it turns red, it means this is present. If it turns yellow, you remember that? If it turns black, don't drink it. Daniel is a biblical litmus test. And so far, every single man, every single king he's come before has found themselves in a world of hurt. Every single one. And then afterwards, I wonder if they said this to themselves. Oh, I should have seen that. I'm a king. I'm the smartest guy in the kingdom. Why didn't I see Daniel as the good guy? None of them did, though, did they? They listened to the world around them. They listened to the men who plotted evil, who made evil. Now, you look at our governments today. Are we any different? Really? Everybody out there in our government is wonderful and kind and sweet and generous. They would never take a dime. I'm being flip here, aren't I? What's the one thing? What's the one thing in this world, in these United States, that we don't need? A government, in my opinion, a national government. What exactly do they produce? Uh-oh, I'm on camera. I mean, we need a military to defend these United States so Pentagon can stay. And we need a couple of generals not out of their minds, but in their minds, to govern the military to help us defend the United States. But what does the rest of the government do? The senators and the congressmen. What? Argue, yeah. They make stupid laws. Well, you know what? States can make stupid laws. We don't need a national stupid law panel, do we? We got state stupid law panels. So we can pass our own stupid laws. What does our national government produce? You know, if they were making brushes or brooms or something like that, that would be something. But, oh, well, we make the laws and we interpret the laws and we, institute the laws. So you make people's lives miserable, right? I'm sounding like a revolutionist, aren't I? No, I'm sounding like an individual who says, why do you need to regulate my life? I already have a God that does that. I know not to steal, but somehow our government doesn't know that. I know not to be ugly and evil. Somehow they don't know that. My God teaches me how to be kind and help Katie when she's hungry, and I don't have to pass laws on that. I can understand Shirley. She's alone all by herself. I can include her in my family and invite her to my home and let you eat all that stuff that I don't like to eat. My God teaches me that. My Lord teaches me that. Daniel went to his house to pray 3 times a day, and he said, this is what I do because this is who I am. God isn't something I do. God is what defines me. And in respect and allegiance and in honor of my God, I will praise Him 3 times a day. I should make it 103 times a day. But I will praise Him 3 times a day. Not this big ugly statue over here, not this big ugly monkey over here, or not this guy over here. And I'm sure not going to listen to this board of people who want to get rid of me because I'm making them look like who they really are. I didn't mean to go radical on you, but think about it for a moment. Who's governing our lives right now? A lot of laws, a lot of politicians, a lot of guys who I don't think they believe in my God. And the reality is we got to judge ourselves on that every day. And this is why this becomes so important. We're not a bunch of weak-minded boneheads that need a God. The very foundational root of faith in Christianity is based on knowledge. And you got to know your God. You got to know you. You got to know His power. You got to know your frailty. You got to know His justice and honesty and perfection. And you got to know your need to be just like Him. Because you're not. And if you think you're all that in a big bag of chips, just wait till a little cancer cell gets hold of you. Or a leukemia cell, or a this cell, or that cell. Who cares? A COVID cell. We even need our government to tell us, line up! There's COVID out there! Well, there's a lot of stuff out there that can kill you besides COVID. A lot of stuff. When you think about it, man was given the privilege to subdue all of nature, according to this God that you don't believe in. He gave us the privilege to subdue everything created under ourselves. And yet we're the fragilest part of creation in the whole creation. You know, a tree is probably smarter and harder and live longer than we will. A tree. How's that making you feel, Dr. Chanter? Oh, I feel great, man. A turtle. Things you got to pick up out of the middle of the road and move over. A turtle lives 200 years. Now, Benny's pretty old, but I don't think she's 200 years yet, are you? A turtle lives 200 years. You know a little fruit fly? What is it, 26 hours, their whole life? And they get everything done they need to do in 26 hours. I can't even dress myself in that time. I get in the shower for a couple hours, I come out, I gotta, moan about my aches and pains, and then I start thinking about, well, I'm a little hungry, I need something to drink, I better get a glass of water, and then I can't wear that shirt, it's got a hole in it, and that shirt's got some barbecue stains on it. By the time I'm out the door, 3 gnats have given their entire life. And we're the best, smartest, strongest, greatest thing God's got going on down here? Really? A horseshoe crab, y'all seen them ever? They can live hundreds of years. They've been around since the beginning of the earth. How long has man been on the planet? Rough estimate, 6,000 to 7,000 years. If you go way, way back to like what might not have been men, but kind of like men, maybe 12,000 years. What's 12,000 years? The earth is 7.5 billion years old, and we've been around 7,000 years, and we got the gall and the wherewithal to stand here and say, there ain't no such thing as God, there ain't no such thing as heaven, there ain't no such thing as hell, and I don't care what that book says. Well, congratulations, you've just got a doctorate in stupidity. Look around you, girls and boys. This pulpit will last longer than me if it doesn't end up in a fire somewhere. And we call ourselves intelligent and smart. New king, same old Daniel, same old God. Lord, it's getting old. We've been in the furnace, we've been in this, we've been in the lion's den. How many kings do I got to go through? Think about it. How many Christians does Jesus have to put up with that line the pews every week? I think he would today, just like in his day, say to his disciples, "Oh, men of little faith, you guys are worried about so much and you haven't got a clue." A clue. Even the last thing he said before he went to the cross, I've got so many other things I could tell you, but you can't handle it. You just don't got the brain. Not yet. So many other things. Well, what are those so many other things? John figured out a few of them. When God said to John, the last guy alive, all the other ones are dead by that time, he said, John, come with me. I want to show you something that the other guys never saw, at least while they were alive. He went to the Revelation. Lee doesn't like the Revelation. Too many creepy things in it.
Yeah.
All right, chapter 5 gets a little aggravating if you read it for its purpose, and its purpose is once again to show us what? Who we are, really. Who God is, really. Before you make a statement, there's no God, there's no heaven, there's no hell, and I'm not affected in any possible way, you might want to take a look around you and make sure you're able to draw your next breath. Because a lot of people have failed to understand that, and of course, now what do you think? All right? That's chapter 5, a New Testament perspective on an Old Testament event. Chapter 6, that's what I said. See the frailty of man right there. Talk about it for an hour, haven't got a clue. Man is who we are, folks, and doesn't mean we can't get better, but we won't if we don't try. So a better thing to say is, I think there is a heaven, I think there is a hell, I think there is a God, but I also think nobody's going to accidentally slip into heaven. Or accidentally slip into hell, for that matter. I think it will be a direct decision at the culmination of each of our lives based on whether or not we used all that smart we say we have. Choice is yours, all right? And no law is going to affect that in any way, shape, or form. You can pass all the laws you want, but man will believe in what man wants to believe in. So think about that, all right? That's all I got. Next week.